Elena, so how did this new plan for Greece go down in the papers?
Well, the keys of a highly risky deal for Greece is Les Echos, the business paper's front page. They don't have a great deal of faith that this bailout will do anything more than stave off a Greek default for perhaps 3 to 6 months, they think. They say, there's still a big gap in Greece's funding a few months down the line. These are big numbers coming out today, 237 billion more euros for Greece, 73% of the creditors' money being written off, but it's still just not enough. The hole in Greece's accounts is so big. So what's the point, they're asking? Why is the EU staying up until 4 a.m. arguing about bailouts if all they're going to do is stave off a default for a few months? Well, according to Les Echos editorial, it's the time that matters, giving creditors time to work out how they're going to cope with losing that money. Some of them might even be looking forward to the defaults, they say, because they can then claim back on the credit default swaps they took out against the probability that Greece would default. They need time, the banks need time, other EU countries need time to work out what they're going to do in terms of a Greek default. So, an extra few months might still serve a purpose, even though it might seem like a very high price to pay just for a few months. But Le Figaro, on its front page, they've headlined their editorial, between a rock and a hard place, if you like, the choice between two bad things. They say, this might look dreadful. They've spent a huge amount of money on a bailout plan that doesn't look like it's going to tide Greece over for more than a few months. But the alternative, we should remember, they say, would have been worse. They say it might look like the austerity measures being imposed on Greece now are tough and grim, but the default would look much worse.
And that creates a real dilemma for the European left, doesn't it? Because you can't back these cuts, but then the alternative, like you say, isn't that good either.
No, exactly. The Greece, as a left, rather stuck in a European trap. That's the front page of Libération. They're talking particularly about the French left. This new bailout had to be approved by the French Parliament yesterday. Of course it was, but rather a lot of Socialist and Green MPs voted against it or abstained. Now, they tell the paper, like François Hollande's spokesman Pierre Moscovici is interviewed by the paper, and he says those who abstained, like himself, had solidarity with Greece highest on their mind. They don't want those tough austerity cuts to be imposed. But the paper, which is left-leaning itself, isn't actually very sympathetic to those left-leaning MPs. They say that it's not really Greece that's on their mind. It's not wanting to do anything risky a few weeks before an election, and certainly not wanting to be seen responsible for dismantling the Greek welfare state, because then it might look like they wouldn't care enough about France's. But they do say that if the left is about to come to power in France, then they need to work out a better, more coordinated way of addressing the euro crisis issue, because this has fractured the French Socialist Party before. It did in 2005 when there was the last vote on the European Constitution. They can't allow it to split the party again.
So Europe an issue in this upcoming, during the presidential campaign. Also education, as you were mentioning yesterday.
Yeah, Le Parisien has got this big question on its front page again. Do French schools need more teachers? They point out 80,000 teaching jobs have been lost under Sarkozy. Hollande says he's going to find 60,000 more. He's going to find the funds to hire another 60,000 teachers. Nicolas Sarkozy, on the other hand, apparently, according to the paper, doesn't think the money should be used to hire more teachers, but instead to make the teaching profession feel more valued by paying the ones that exist higher salaries.
Staying with politics, bad news yesterday for Marine Le Pen.
Yes, as Le Figaro reports, she, of course, was been campaigning. She went to the Constitutional Court yesterday to try and get the fact that anyone wanting to stand for the French presidency needs 500 signatures from local mayors in order to get their names on the ballot paper. She wanted that declared unconstitutional, and she wanted the mayors' sponsorships to remain secret. Now, her argument was thrown out of court yesterday, so she hasn't had an awful lot of media mileage out of this, but it does look like she will get those 500 signatures and get on the ballot paper. And remember that, while she's making a lot of noise about this, she's actually going down in the polls, so perhaps she won't be as significant a political force as we might have thought a few months ago.
And very briefly, Dominique Strauss-Kahn in the headlines again, of course.
He is indeed, and let's look at the Huffington Post today. They have actually done a big article all about him. Of course, there was some questioning about whether or not they would cover the story, with his wife being appointed the editor of that site, but they do have a very thorough bit of coverage there.
All right, thanks very much, Elena, for that look at the French press. You're watching live from Paris. Let's take another look.